On Christmas Eve, my three children laughed at me in our family group chat. They wrote, "Why does he keep inviting us? He's exhausting." Then another message followed, "Let him eat alone. Nobody wants to be there." And then the laughing emoji. They didn't know I was reading every word. They didn't know that while they were mocking me, I was sitting alone at a dining table set for 10, staring at plates that would never be touched. And they definitely didn't know that by the next morning, their lives would begin to unravel in ways they never imagined. Another Christmas is coming. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you were listening in the comments. And I want to share what happened the last one, the night that finally forced me to choose myself. It was just after 7 o'clock on Christmas Eve in Portland, Oregon. Rain tapped softly against my kitchen window, the kind that never quite turns into snow here, just hangs heavy in the air like unshed tears. The house smelled of rosemary, butter, and slow-roasted turkey. Cinnamon drifted from the apple pie cooling on the counter. I had set the table for 10, not because I expected 10 people to come, but because I wanted to believe they might. There were 8 full-place settings and 2 smaller chairs at the end. I had bought those little chairs months earlier, sanding the edges myself so my grandchildren, Lucas and May, wouldn't scrape their legs climbing up. I even tied red ribbons around the backs. Silly maybe? Hope often is. I wasn't lonely by nature. At 62, I had a full life. I taught part-time woodworking classes at the community center. I volunteered twice a week at a food pantry. I played cards every Thursday night with men who knew my stories and still laughed at them. My wife, Eleanor, passed away 7 years earlier, and losing her nearly broke me. But I rebuilt. I had friends. I had routines. I had peace. What I didn't have was my children. 2 weeks before Christmas, I sent a message in our family group chat. Christmas Eve dinner at my place. Same as always. I'd love to have everyone together. My oldest son, Michael, replied, "We'll see." My middle son, Andrew, sent a thumbs up. My daughter, Claire, didn't open the message for 4 days. Still, I cooked. I brined a turkey for 3 full days. I made Eleanor's stuffing recipe, the one she learned from her grandmother, with sage and dried cherries. I peeled potatoes until my hands cramped. I polished the silverware. I used the good plates, the ones we saved for holidays, the ones my children used to fight over when they were young. At 7:30, I checked my phone. That's when I saw the messages. They weren't meant for me, but they were about me. "He's unbearable lately, always playing the victim. I can't believe he thinks we'd skip our plans for him." Then the line that settled into my chest like ice. "Let him eat alone. It's easier." I read it once. Then again. My fingers hovered over the screen. I could have typed, "Wrong chat." I could have said, "I can see this." I could have begged, or scolded, or asked what I'd done wrong. Instead, I set the phone down. My hands were steady. That surprised me. When Eleanor died, I collapsed in a hospital hallway, sobbing until strangers pulled me into their arms. This felt different, colder, sharper, like something final clicking into place. I looked at the empty chairs, the small ones, the ribbons. The radio played a soft carol in the background, and for the first time all evening, I turned it off. I didn't cry. I walked into my study, sat at my desk, and opened my laptop. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I was done pretending this didn't hurt. That night, I made a decision I had avoided for years. And by morning, my children would finally see me. Not as an obligation, not as a punchline, but as a man who was finished being invisible. Sitting there in my study, laptop open, the house quiet behind me, I realized something that hurt more than the messages themselves. This hadn't started tonight. Christmas Eve was just the moment when the truth finally stopped whispering and started shouting. I stared at the dark screen, my reflection faintly visible. The man looking back at me wasn't weak. He wasn't broken. He was tired. Tired of excusing behavior that would have never been acceptable if the roles were reversed. For years, I told myself my children were busy, that life was harder now, that I needed to be patient. But patience, I'd learned too late, can quietly turn into permission. Michael was my oldest, 40 years old now, a financial advisor who wore tailored suits and spoke confidently about markets and growth. 3 years earlier, he'd come to me with a plan. A sure thing, he'd said. An investment opportunity that just needed a little push. That little push had been $75,000. Just until it turns around, he told me at my kitchen table, the same one now set for Christmas dinner. You know, I'd never ask if it wasn't solid. I'd written the check without hesitation. Not because I believed the plan, but because I believed in him. The money never came back. Not a dollar. Not an apology either. Just excuses. Market shifts. Bad timing. People he trusted who failed him. Somehow, his failure became my responsibility. After that, his calls became shorter. Always rushed. Always needing something. Babysitting. A quick loan. A favor. He dropped Lucas and May off whenever it suited him, sometimes hours late picking them up, barely meeting my eyes when he did. Thanks, Dad, he'd say, already backing toward the door. Andrew was different. More charming. Less direct. He borrowed $90,000 2 years ago for a real estate venture he swore was guaranteed. When it collapsed, he sat across from me, rubbing his temples, and said, "You should have warned me. It was risky." I remember blinking at him. He was 35 years old. When had I become responsible for protecting my grown children from their own decisions? Then there was Claire, my youngest, 31, polished, perfect, every inch of her life curated for public consumption. Her social media pages looked like magazine spreads, brunches, events, smiling faces in perfect lighting. I found out from someone else that she'd stopped inviting me to things. A neighbor's daughter mentioned a gallery opening Claire hosted. "Your dad wasn't there?" she asked casually. Claire's answer, apparently, had been a shrug and a laugh. He wouldn't fit the vibe. I wasn't aesthetic enough. A retired carpenter with calloused hands and stories that didn't fit neatly into a caption. I made excuses for that too. She's young. She'll understand someday. She's just figuring out who she is. But love that constantly waits to be recognized starts to shrink. And I let it. I stayed available. I stayed generous. I stayed quiet. Because that's what fathers do, right? We endure. The clock on my desk read 8:15. In the kitchen, the turkey rested under foil, juices pooling on the platter Eleanor's mother gave us for our wedding. I could picture her standing beside me years ago, swatting my hand while I tried to sneak a taste. "You'll ruin it," she'd say, smiling. The memory didn't hurt the way it used to. It felt distant, like a photograph. What hurt was realizing how long I'd allowed myself to be treated like an afterthought. The group chat messages echoed in my mind. Let him eat alone. They didn't say it with anger. They said it with ease. That was the worst part. Disrespect doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it slips in quietly, disguised as familiarity. I scrolled through my contacts, not really sure what I was looking for until a name stopped me. Ethan Miller, 24 years old, the son of a friend from my Thursday card group. A sharp kid, smart with technology. Last year, when he lost his job, I let him stay in my guest room rent-free until he got back on his feet. He answered on the second ring. "Mr. Harris?" "Ethan," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "I need a favor." There was a pause. "Of course. What's wrong? Can you come by tonight?" I asked. "I need help setting something up. Cameras. Streaming." Another pause. Longer this time. "Are you okay?" "I will be," I said, "but I need someone who knows what they're doing. I can be there in 20 minutes. When I hung up, I didn't feel relief. I felt resolve. While I waited, I walked back into the dining room. The table looked like something from a magazine. Candles unlit. Napkins folded neatly. Glasses polished until they caught the light. No one was coming. And for the first time, I stopped pretending that realization was temporary. I sat at the head of the table and imagined what it would look like from the outside. One man, 10 empty seats. 2 small chairs meant for children who weren't here. A story. Whether I told it or not, it existed. I stood and went back to the study just as headlights swept across the front window. Ethan arrived right on time. He stepped inside, shaking off rain, eyes immediately scanning my face. "Mr. Harris," he said gently. "What's going on?" "I'm going to eat Christmas dinner alone," I said, "and I want people to see it." His eyes widened. "Live," I added. He didn't ask why. He just nodded. "Okay," he said. "Let's do it right." Ethan moved through my dining room with quiet efficiency, like someone who understood this wasn't just about technology. He pulled a small ring light from his backpack, set it near the end of the table, and adjusted it until the glow softened the shadows without hiding them. He angled his phone so the full table was visible, every empty chair, every place setting, the two smaller seats at the far end. "You sure about this?" he asked gently. I looked at the table, at the untouched serving dishes, at the napkins I had folded twice because the first attempt didn't feel right, at the chair where Eleanor used to sit, tapping her fork impatiently while telling me to stop fussing. "I've never been more sure of anything," I said. He swallowed, nodded once, and asked, "What do you want to call it?" I thought for a moment. "Christmas dinner. A father's story." Ethan typed it in. "Which platform?" "Whichever one lets people see it without filters," I replied. He gave a small, sad smile. "That would be all of them." The room felt different now. Charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. "Going live in 3, he said. I adjusted my chair, straightened my apron, and placed my hands flat on the table. My pulse was steady. Not fast, not slow. 2. I glanced once more at the empty doorway, a habit I hadn't even realized I still had. 1. A small red dot appeared on the screen. We were live. "Good evening," I said, my voice sounding steadier than I expected. "My name is Daniel Harris. I'm 62 years old. Tonight is Christmas Eve." I paused, letting the silence breathe. I prepared this meal for my family. My 3 children, their partners, and my 2 grandchildren. I gestured gently to the table, not theatrically, just enough for the camera to see what words already had. "As you can see," I continued, "I'll be eating alone." I didn't accuse. I didn't dramatize. I didn't ask for sympathy. I carved the turkey slowly, the knife sliding through crisp skin and tender meat. Steam rose, filling the air. I served myself modest portions, the way Eleanor always insisted we should. "This isn't a story about abandonment," I said after a moment. "It's about visibility." Ethan sat quietly behind the camera. I could see the viewer count climbing in the corner of the screen. Hundreds, then thousands. I talked while I ate. I spoke about being a father, about working long hours when my kids were young, about missing school plays and soccer games so bills could be paid, about believing that love meant giving without limits. "I don't regret loving my children," I said. "I regret forgetting to love myself alongside them." The comments rolled in faster than I could read. "This is heartbreaking. My dad eats alone too." Someone called their parents right now. I mentioned the money I'd loaned. The promises never kept. The quiet way I was always expected to understand, to forgive, to wait. "I was told tonight that nobody wanted to spend Christmas with me," I said calmly. "That I should eat alone." I looked directly into the camera. "So I am." The viewer count surged again. Ethan's jaw tightened. His knuckles were white around the phone. "I'm not angry," I continued. "Anger burns out. This is clarity." I lifted my glass of water. "I'm grateful," I said, "for this meal, for the years I had with my wife, for the people who still show up in my life." I raised the glass slightly. "And for anyone watching who feels invisible tonight, you matter." I took a sip. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of cutlery and quiet breathing. I ended the stream without ceremony. "Thank you for listening," I said. "Merry Christmas." Ethan reached forward and tapped the screen. The red dot disappeared. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Ethan exhaled slowly. "That was powerful." "I didn't plan it to be," I said. "I just told the truth." He glanced at his phone. "You might want to sit down." "I am sitting." "No," he said softly. "I mean, really sit." I looked over. The video had already been shared thousands of times. By the time I finished my plate, there were over 6,000 people watching the replay. By the time I stood to clear the table, it had crossed 100,000 views. Ethan shook his head in disbelief. "People are tagging news pages." "I didn't want attention," I said. He looked at me carefully. "You wanted to be seen." He wasn't wrong. After Ethan left, the house felt strangely peaceful. I packed leftovers into containers, wrapped the turkey, blew out the candles. I slept better that night than I had in years. Christmas morning, I woke to my phone vibrating on a nightstand like it was alive. Messages, notifications, missed calls. The video had passed several million views overnight. Headlines followed. Elderly father eats Christmas dinner alone after family's cruel texts. Quiet Christmas live stream sparks national conversation. I sat on the edge of the bed, stunned. The comments were overwhelming. Strangers offering kindness, sharing their own stories, calling their parents. And then I saw it. A screenshot. Our family group chat. The word my children had written. Public now. I didn't know who shared it. I didn't ask. The truth had found its own way out. My phone rang. Howard from Car Night. Daniel, he said without preamble. You're not spending today alone. Meet us at Maple Street Cafe in an hour. I'm fine, I said. You don't get to decide that, he replied. Friends don't let friends disappear. I smiled for the first time that morning. I'll be there. As I hung up, the phone rang again. And again. 3 names flashed on the screen. Michael, Andrew, Claire. My children have finally seen me. I let the phone ring. Not because I was afraid to answer, but because for the first time in decades, I didn't feel obligated to. The screen lit up again. Michael. I watched it buzz itself quiet. Then Andrew. Then Claire. 3 calls. Back to back. No messages. No concern. Just urgency. Now are you okay? Now we didn't mean it. Just panic. I showered slowly, shaved, and dressed like it was any other morning. I poured coffee and stood by the kitchen window, watching the rain slide down the glass. My phone kept vibrating on the counter, relentless, like an alarm no one wanted to silence. At 11 o'clock, I finally answered. Dad, Michael said, breathless, you need to take that video down. Right now. It was live. I replied evenly. There's nothing to take down. You know what I mean, he snapped. This is blowing up. My firm called me this morning. Clients are calling. This is a disaster. I took a sip of coffee. I ate dinner, I said. On Christmas Eve. Alone. That's not the point, he said sharply. I smiled faintly. That's exactly the point. Silence stretched between us. You made us look heartless, Michael said finally. I didn't make you look like anything, I replied. I just didn't protect you anymore. His voice dropped. You didn't have to embarrass us like this. I didn't intend to embarrass anyone, I said. I intended to stop pretending. He exhaled hard. You need to post something. Say it was a misunderstanding. Say we had other plans. I could, I said slowly, but it wouldn't be true. You're being vindictive. Vindictive would have been sharing the messages myself. I said. I didn't. Michael cursed under his breath. This could ruin me, he said. I trusted you with $75,000. I replied. That didn't seem to worry you. The line went quiet. Then he hung up. Andrew called next. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. What the hell is wrong with you? He barked. Do you have any idea how much damage this is doing? I imagine it feels uncomfortable, I said. Uncomfortable, he scoffed. I lost 2 clients this morning. People are canceling contracts. They think I'm some kind of monster. I leaned back in my chair. You left your father alone on Christmas Eve, I said. What would you call that? That's not fair, he snapped. Things came up. They always do, I replied. Just never for me. You've made your point, Andrew said. Now fix it. Fix what? This, he said sharply. Say you exaggerated. Say you're dramatic. Say anything. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see it. I'm done lying so you can stay comfortable. You're unbelievable, he said. Absolutely unbelievable. Perhaps, I said calmly. But at least I'm honest. He hung up without another word. Claire waited until mid-afternoon. When her name finally appeared on the screen, I hesitated. Then I answered. Daddy, she said softly. I closed my eyes. She hadn't called me that in nearly 20 years. I'm so sorry, she said quickly. About the text. About everything. It was stupid. I didn't mean it. You didn't mean for me to see it. I corrected gently. A sharp inhale. People are attacking me, she said, her voice trembling. Brand are pulling out. My manager won't return my calls. You have to help me. I looked around my quiet kitchen. Ow, I asked. Post something, she pleaded. Tell them you forgive us. Tell them it wasn't that bad. I thought of the chairs, the ribbons, the silence. Was it not that bad when you stopped inviting me places? I asked. When you said I didn't fit your image? She was quiet. How did you dash? I hear more than you think, I said. And I see more than you wanted me to. Dad, please, she whispered. I'm scared. I believed her. But fear is not remorse. The truth is already out, I said. What happens next isn't up to me. She cried then, quietly. I love you, she said. I didn't answer right away. I love you too, I said finally. But love doesn't mean erasing consequences. She hung up. By evening, the calls stopped. The silence returned, but it felt different now. Not empty. Earned. I went to Maple Street Cafe as promised. Howard, Frank, and Denise were already there, coffee waiting. They stood when I walked in. Frank clapped my shoulder. You okay? I am, I said honestly. Denise squeezed my hand. You were brave. I was tired, I replied. Turns out that looks a lot like bravery. Howard leaned forward. Your kids must be losing their minds. Maybe, I said, but they finally know I exist. As we talked, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I stepped outside to answer. Mr. Harris, a measured voice said. My name is Leonard Grant. I'm an state attorney here in Oregon. I frowned. I'm not suing anyone. I know, he replied. That's not why I'm calling. There was a pause. I've been following your situation, he continued. And I believe it's time we discuss protecting your assets. I leaned against the brick wall, rain misting the air. Protecting them from what? I asked. From people who may suddenly remember you exist, he said gently. I didn't need him to say their names. I already knew. Can we meet? He asked. Sooner is better. Yes, I said after a moment. We can. When I hung up, I felt something unexpected. Not anger, not triumph, clarity. For the first time, the future felt like it belonged to me. 2 days after Christmas, I walked into Leonard Grant's office with a manila folder tucked under my arm. The building sat downtown, all glass and steel, the kind of place where footsteps echo and voices stay polite. I arrived early, not because I was nervous, but because I was ready. Leonard stood when I entered. Mid-50s, calm eyes, no wasted movements. Mr. Harris, he said, offering his hand. I'm glad you came in. So am I replied. We sat across from each other at a long table. Sunlight spilled through the windows, casting clean lines across the polished surface. I laid out the contents of my folder, deeds, bank statements, insurance papers, my existing will. Leonard reviewed them carefully. You've done well, he said after a moment. Better than most people your age. I shrugged. I lived modestly. And you invested wisely, he added. Your total assets are substantial. He named a number that made even me pause. Just over $3 million. I'd known the figure in pieces, the house, the accounts, the retirement fund, but hearing it all together felt strange. Not pride, awareness. Leonard folded his hands. Tell me what you want to accomplish. I didn't hesitate. I want peace, I said, and I want clarity. He nodded. Then let's be specific. I took a breath. First, I said, I want to revise my will. Leonard picked up his pen. My children will each receive the legal minimum required under state law. Nothing more. He paused, then wrote. And the remainder? He asked. To charity, I replied. Organizations that support elderly parents who've been abandoned or exploited. He glanced up. Any particular one? Yes, I said. The Quiet Years Foundation. They help seniors rebuild lives after family estrangement. Leonard smiled faintly. That's fitting. Second, I continued. I want trusts established for my grandchildren. How much? He asked. $250,000 each, I said. Managed independently until they reach the age of 26. And their parents? Leonard asked carefully. No access, I said. Ever. He nodded. Understood. They're innocent, I added. They shouldn't suffer for their parents' choices. Leonard looked at me for a long moment. That's generous, he said. It's intentional, I replied. He waited. There's a third change, I said. He raised his pen again. I'm selling my house. Leonard blinked. Your primary residence? Yes. You realize, he said slowly, that once it's sold, your children will have no claim to it. I realize, I said. They stopped treating it like a home a long time ago. He leaned back. You're certain? I thought of Eleanor, of the dining room, of the silence. Yes. Leonard nodded. Then we'll proceed. The papers were prepared quickly. I returned 2 days later to sign. Witnesses present. Notarized. Final. As my pen moved across the last page, I felt something lift from my chest. Not relief. Release. When I stood to leave, Leonard shook my hand again. You know, he said, people often think this kind of planning is about punishment. It's not, I replied. It's about boundaries, he said. Exactly. My phone buzzed as I stepped onto the sidewalk. Unknown number. I considered ignoring it, then answered. Mr. Harris. A woman's voice said warmly. My name is Rachel Cole. I'm a producer with Hearthlight Network. I paused. Yes. I saw your Christmas Eve video, she said. So did millions of others. I said nothing. We'd like to talk to you, she continued. About a series. A series? I repeated. Yes, she said. Cooking. Storytelling. Conversations about family, boundaries, and rebuilding life. I leaned against a lamppost, stunned. I'm not a celebrity, I said. That's why people trust you, she replied. She gave me her contact information. Think about it, she said. Your story matters. When the call ended, I stood there for a long moment, city noise swirling around me. My children thought this chapter was about loss. They were wrong. This was about beginning again. That evening, I returned home and packed the first box. Not in anger, in intention. Each item placed carefully, each memory acknowledged. I wasn't erasing my past. I was choosing my future. And for the first time in my life, I did it without asking permission. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They came quietly, almost politely, as if the world itself was correcting something that had been out of balance for a long time. The first update came from my neighbor, Ruth Collins. Ruth had lived across the street for nearly 20 years. She had a habit of stopping by unannounced with baked goods and information she probably shouldn't have had. On the 3rd of January, she appeared at my door holding a container of lemon bars and an expression that told me she was bursting to speak. Daniel, she said, stepping inside. Have you heard? Heard what? I asked, already knowing it would be about my children. She lowered her voice, like the walls might be listening. Michael was let go. I set the kettle down slowly. Let go. I repeated. Fired, she clarified. My cousin works in compliance at his firm. Clients were threatening to pull their accounts. The board didn't want the association. I nodded once. Ruth studied my face. You don't seem surprised. I'm not, I said honestly. Michael built his career on trust. Trust is fragile. She hesitated. His wife's family is furious too. They've always been very image conscious. I didn't comment. After Ruth left, I stood by the sink, watching steam rise from the kettle. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt inevitability. 2 days later, I ran into Frank from my Thursday card group at the grocery store. He was selecting oranges when he spotted me. Daniel, he said, leaning in, you hear about Andrew? I shook my head. Real estate's drying up for him fast, Frank said. People don't want to work with someone the internet decided is heartless. I picked up an orange, rolled in my palm. Apparently he's over-leveraged, Frank continued. Credit cards, loans, living way above his means. The deals falling through just exposed it. I nodded. Andrew had always chased the appearance of success. The cars, the suits, the dinners he couldn't afford. Debt doesn't disappear when the applause stops. The third update came from Howard. We met for lunch at our usual diner on the 7th of January. Halfway through his sandwich, he cleared his throat. I looked something up, he said. I raised an eyebrow. That sounds dangerous. He almost smiled. Claire lost all her brand partnerships, he said. Every last one. I set my fork down. She's been dropped by her management agency, he continued. Apparently companies don't want influencers associated with mocking elderly parents on Christmas. I closed my eyes briefly. And, he added carefully, she had to move out of her apartment. Couldn't afford the rent. There it was. The line between consequence and compassion blurred. Howard watched me closely. You okay? I don't know, I said quietly. I didn't want this. But you didn't cause it, he said. He was right. I hadn't posted their messages. I hadn't named them. I hadn't asked the internet to judge. I had simply stopped shielding them. The final update came unexpectedly. Ruth returned on the 10th of January, no lemon bars this time. She sat at my kitchen table, hands folded. Michael's wife is filing for divorce, she said softly. She wants full custody. I closed my eyes. She says the scandal exposed things she'd been ignoring for years, Ruth added. hidden accounts, lies, the works. I took a long breath. Ruth reached across the table, touched my hand. You don't seem happy. I'm not, I said. I'm just accepting. Accepting what? That I didn't break my children, I said. I just stopped holding them together. She nodded slowly. That takes strength. No, I said. It takes honesty. That night, alone in my quiet house, I sat by the window and watched the rain paint the glass. My children's lives were unraveling. Mine wasn't. Mine was finally still. The phone buzzed once. A missed call from Rachel Cole, the producer. I let it ring. For years, my life had been shaped by reacting to my children's needs. Now, I was learning how to choose deliberately, not out of bitterness, out of self-respect. I returned Rachel Cole's call the next morning, not because I was chasing something new, but because for the first time in years, I wasn't running for myself. Mr. Harris, she said brightly when I answered. I was hoping you'd call. You can call me Daniel, I replied. She laughed. Fair enough. Daniel, we'd love to meet. No pressure, just a conversation. We met 3 days later at a small studio office tucked behind a renovated warehouse. Exposed brick. Coffee that tasted expensive. People who looked busy but not rushed. Rachel introduced me to 2 producers and a director. They didn't talk about ratings first. They talked about why the video mattered. You didn't ask for pity, the director said. You didn't lash out. You just existed honestly. That's rare, Rachel added. People trust that. They proposed a limited series. Cooking, storytelling, conversations about family, boundaries, aging, and rebuilding a sense of self when life doesn't turn out the way you planned. I didn't answer immediately. I'm not interested in becoming a symbol, I said carefully. Rachel nodded. We're not asking you to be one, just to be yourself. That night, I thought about it long after the house grew quiet. For years, my identity had been built around being needed. A father, a provider, a safety net. What happens when those roles are taken away, or worse, taken for granted? Maybe this was a way to explore that question. I said yes. Production began in late January. The first episode was titled The Dinner That Changed Everything. I stood in a studio kitchen under bright lights, wearing my old apron, the one Eleanor used to tease me about. Butter, garlic, fresh herbs laid out neatly before me. The camera rolled. Food, I said, is memory. I told my story while preparing a simple roasted chicken. No dramatics, no villain speeches, just honesty. When the episode aired, millions watched. Rachel called me that night, breathless. The response is overwhelming. I didn't do anything special, I said. That's exactly why it worked, she replied. Around the same time, my house sold. The same house where my children learned to ride bikes. Where Eleanor and I danced barefoot in the kitchen on our anniversary. Where silence had grown heavier than memory. I didn't cry when I signed the papers. I felt lighter. I moved into a smaller apartment near the river. 2 bedrooms, big windows, clean lines, no ghosts in the corners. It was mine. I hosted a small housewarming dinner. Howard brought wine. Frank brought bread. Denise brought flowers. We laughed. We ate. We told stories. At one point, Howard raised his glass. To Daniel, he said, who finally remembered he gets to live too. I smiled. Later that night, after everyone left, I sat alone by the window, city lights reflecting off the water. My phone buzzed. A video message. Lucas. Hi, Grandpa, he said shyly. May leaned into the frame, waving enthusiastically. My chest tightened. Dad says we can visit you soon, Lucas added. I miss you. I miss you too, I whispered after the screen went dark. A week later, 3 envelopes arrived in the mail. Handwritten, one from each of my children. I didn't open them right away. Some truths need space before they're received. I placed them on the counter and made tea. I looked around my apartment, at the life I was building, at the peace I hadn't known I was allowed to want. I realized something then. Choosing myself hadn't destroyed my family. It had simply stopped enabling their worst versions. What came next, reconciliation or distance, would have to be earned. And for the first time, I was willing to wait. Not in desperation, in wholeness. The letter sat on my kitchen counter for 2 full days. 3 envelopes. 3 different handwritings. 3 chances to be disappointed again. I didn't rush. In the past, I'd always open my children's words immediately, texts, emails, voicemails, hoping they might finally say what I'd been waiting years to hear. I wasn't waiting anymore. On the third morning, I made tea, carried the mug to the small table by the window, and sat down. Rain traced slow paths down the glass. The city moved quietly below. I picked up the first envelope. Michael's. His handwriting was tighter than I remembered. Careful, like someone measuring every word before letting it escape. Dad, I lost my job. No excuses. No preamble. Stella and I are separating. I'm living in a small apartment now. For the first time in years, I'm the one making breakfast, packing lunches, reading bedtime stories. I paused. I could picture it. Michael, awkward and unsure, learning a role he'd avoided by outsourcing it to everyone else. I see now how I treated you. Like a resource. Like something I could draw from without replenishing. I thought respect was automatic. I didn't realize how much I drained it. My throat tightened. I'm in therapy, not to win you back, but because I don't want my children to grow up thinking love is transactional. That word, transactional. You don't owe me forgiveness. I just needed you to know I finally understand. I folded the letter carefully and set it aside. Andrew's envelope was next. The paper inside was creased, as if he'd rewritten it several times. Dad, I've lost almost everything. He didn't soften it. The deal's dried up. The credit card's maxed out. I'm working at a small restaurant now. Long hours. Honest pay. It's humbling. I smiled faintly. Andrew had always avoided humility like it was contagious. I blamed you for my failures because it was easier than facing my own recklessness. I took your money and your patience and treated them like guarantees. A long pause followed in my reading. I'm paying you back. Every cent. Even if it takes me the rest of my life. Not because you asked, but because I need to become someone who keeps his word. I exhaled slowly. Claire's envelope was last. It was lighter. Her handwriting was softer, less polished. Dad, I deleted my social media accounts. I raised an eyebrow. All of them. She continued. I realized I'd been living for strangers' approval and calling it success. I was ashamed of you because you didn't fit an image I was desperate to protect. The words stung, but they were honest. I'm working at a bookstore now, shelving books, talking to real people, learning to sit with silence. I imagine her there, surrounded by stories instead of spotlights. I don't expect things to go back to how they were. I don't even know what that would look like. I just know I'm sorry, not because I lost everything, but because I finally understand what I almost lost. I set the letter down. 3 apologies, different voices, same lesson. It had cost them everything they thought mattered. I didn't respond. Not that day. Not that week. Growth needs room to breathe. Forgiveness isn't a reflex, it's a process. But something had shifted. For the first time, my children weren't asking me to fix anything. They were fixing themselves. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, then answered. Hello. A small voice. Hesitant. Grandpa. My chest tightened instantly. Yes, I said softly. It's me. Dad says I can call you now, Lucas said. May's here too. A pause. We miss you. I closed my eyes. I miss you too, I said. Very much. Can we see you soon? May asked. I didn't hesitate. Of course, I said. Anytime. When the call ended, I sat there for a long moment, phone resting in my hand. I wasn't ready to fully reconcile with my children, but the door wasn't locked. It was simply guarded. That night, I stood in my kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, when Rachel texted. Studio loved the last episode. Audience response is incredible. I smiled. My life was full, not because my children had returned, but because I no longer needed them to validate my worth. If they came back, it would be because they chose me, not because they needed me. And that made all the difference. Spring arrived quietly, not all at once, not with fanfare, but in small permissions. Lighter mornings, longer evenings, windows cracked open just enough to let the air change. It had been almost 6 months since that Christmas Eve. 6 months since I sat alone at a table meant for 10. And 6 months since I stopped shrinking myself to be easier to ignore. I agreed to see my children again, but only on my terms. Neutral ground. No performances. No apologies designed to erase the past. Just honesty. We met one at a time. Michael first, a small cafe near the river. Mid-morning, he arrived early and stood when I walked in, unsure whether to hug me. We didn't. We sat. I'm not here to ask for anything, he said quickly. I just wanted to say thank you. For what? I asked. For not rescuing me, he said. Losing everything forced me to grow up. I studied him. He looked different, less polished, more present. I'm rebuilding, he continued. Slowly, properly, whether you're part of that or not. I understand. I nodded. That's the first honest thing you've said to me in years, I replied. When we parted, there was no promise of regular dinners. No illusions of returning to what was. Just mutual respect. That was enough. Andrew came next. We met at a park. He wore a plain jacket, no expensive watch. His hands are rougher now. I cook for a living, he said with a wry smile. Turns out it's harder work than pretending to be successful. We walked in silence for a while. I'm paying you back, he said eventually. Every month, even if you don't need it. I don't, I replied. But I appreciate the principle. He stopped walking. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. I just want to earn self-respect. I looked at him. That's the only kind worth having, I said. Claire was last. She asked to meet at the bookstore where she worked. I watched her from the entrance for a moment, shelving books, talking quietly with a customer, unrecognizable in the best way. She approached slowly. I didn't know who I was without an audience, she said after we Saturday. Turns out I like this version better. I believed her. I don't need you to perform regret for me, I said. I need consistency. She nodded. I'm learning that. We hugged when we parted, not because everything was fixed, but because nothing was being forced. The grandchildren came first. That was important. Lucas and May visited my apartment one Saturday afternoon, wide-eyed and curious. They explored every corner like it was a museum. This is your house? May asked. Yes, I smiled. What do you think? It's cozy, she declared. And you have snacks. Lucas helped me cook. He listened, asked questions, paid attention. Later, when they left, my apartment felt fuller than it ever had. My life settled into a rhythm. The show continued. Letters poured in from strangers, parents, grandparents, even children, all saying the same thing in different words. Thank you for reminding me I'm allowed to matter. Rachel and I grew closer, naturally without pressure. Two people who understood loss and chose presence instead of bitterness. One evening, after filming Wrapped, we cooked together in my kitchen. She looked around and said, "You seem lighter." "I am," I replied. I stopped asking for permission to exist. People often ask if I regret the live stream. I don't. Not because it hurt my children, but because it saved me. I learned something important. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's erasure. And forgiveness doesn't mean returning to what hurt you. It means choosing peace over punishment, including punishment of yourself. If you're a parent listening to this, hear me. Your worth is not measured by how much your children need you. It's inherent. You don't stop being valuable because someone forgets to call. You don't lose dignity because you stop begging to be included. Choosing yourself is not abandonment. It's survival. Boundaries aren't walls. They're bridges to healthier relationships or to freedom when relationships refuse to heal. That Christmas dinner changed everything. Not because my children laughed, but because I finally stopped laughing along. I stopped being invisible. And in doing so, I became whole.